Are we live?
Not with sound.
It's okay. I was muted, so it wouldn't have mattered either way.
Let's try this with sound.
All right, go Immo.
I think we should now have sound if everything is fine. How is our sound going? I can hear the sound, somebody says, so I'll take this as a yes. Yes, I think I think I know what happened there. Anyway, so I was just saying this is not the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. This is the .NET and Runtime Community Stand-Up. The ASP.NET one already happened 2 days ago. There was some hiccup on the YouTube side where it was disconnecting with the wrong titles, but other than that, it's all good. So what else would I want to say? Yes. So today we want to talk a little bit about runtime stuff. So I have some things I want to talk about. I think Phillip has some F# things he wants to talk about. And I think Kathleen had some interesting ideas she wanted to talk about, probably involving the bad word starting with a V, but I'm not saying right now. All right. So
There's a good word and a bad word starts with V. So you know, I might talk about either one, or I might talk about C#. We'll see. So ask us about. Are you going to start, Immo? All right.
And all right, now you can hopefully hear me and see my screen at the same time. Isn't that magic? So yeah, we are streaming from home, and there's always something new that doesn't work. So the thing I wanted to briefly mention is, if you're a contributor, check out the survey that we have. And so what we want to talk about here is effectively there's a survey that you should fill out. It has, I think, 30 questions or something like this. So it should take you I think it took me 4 minutes when I did the dry run. And the point of the survey really is for us to figure out what is our experience that we give people that contribute to our repos. And so there is a kind of a quick survey on what repo are you contributing to, and then basically some questions about what the experience was. And what's important to us is there's a few things here that text boxes, which are basically are there any other things you did with our repos? And then generally speaking, how happy were you? And so this happiness is basically a bunch of different things, right? It's effectively us trying to figure out whether we should improve the tooling, whether we should improve the documentation, or whether we should just improve, generally speaking, our GitHub structure when it comes to discovering repositories, right? Because we have, I think last thing I checked, we had 200 or 300 repositories on GitHub, so it can be challenging just finding the correct repo, finding the correct set of people. And then there's also the overall problems that I think we're trying to solve as well, which is, when you file an issue, when you file a PR, how long does it actually take us to respond to that, right? And different repos have, different amounts of people watching this, so our response times are generally not uniform across all our repositories. And we're trying to improve this by either having some tooling or just staffing more people with watching more repositories. And so that's kind of where we are right now. And I think we already had a bunch of people filling in the survey. If you haven't, please do so. If you haven't contributed to the repos but you filed issues, that also counts as contributions. So it's not just PRs; it's kind of any interactions you had with us on the GitHub side. And we're just really curious to see what the feedback ends up being. And then I didn't say it today, but this session here is really meant to be interactive, so make sure to ask tons of questions in chat. And hopefully that is working for us. So somebody says in chat, Immo's really quiet, Kathleen is echoing. I should not be really quiet right now. I think I fixed that part. And Kathleen isn't saying anything right now, so she can't be echoing that badly.
Yeah, but if I echo, it's not me. I don't think. I've got the headphones on. Is Phillip making me echo? Am I echoing?
No, I was unmuted. Sorry, I was muted the whole time. Now I'm unmuted. And
but am I still echoing, folks?
As far as my audio levels are looking, I don't think you do.
Yeah, I didn't hear any echo from you, but I don't know. Okay. I also just mute myself whenever I'm not talking because I don't have the headphones.
Yeah, I can't even hear it on my own machine, so there must be some It's possible that there is some issue with the why Skype streams, because today we're using Skype, not Teams, in the hope that we get better video signal out of that, but if that doesn't work for us, we are switching back to Teams next time we're doing this. Some reverb is going on apparently, which is funny because I can't see it in the audio meters. Anyway, so this is what we had for the repo experience survey. If you have any questions on that one, or if you have any comments on this one in the chat, please do so. All right, so then, Phillip, what do you want to talk about?
What do I want to talk about? Oh, there's so many things that I could talk about, Immo. I think the main thing is build is that's next week, right? I'm pretty sure it's next week.
Next week.
So at build, there's updates going around for everything. If they're weird, if there weren't any updates to build. And so the F language is also going to be getting an update. It's more of an incremental one. So we ship F Sharp 5 preview 1 alongside .NET preview 1, and sort of as preview of .NET 5 has there's been an updated compiler, and sort of when there's new features available, they're available in the preview, and that's exactly what's happening this time. So by this preview, we'll have full support for interoperating with default interface methods. Default interface members. It's not just methods. It could also be properties from F Sharp. We're explicitly not allowing the F Sharp compiler to produce them, but we are allowing them to consume them. So if you have any API that depends on consuming a default interface member, then you can just trivially do that from F Sharp. And that's really sort of the main feature that's landing in the forthcoming preview that's going to be landing at build. However, there are a lot of improvements related to the compiler and tools that are going to be shipping there too. The first thing that we did is, it's not really like specific to this preview, but especially over the past, I'd say 6 months, a year to the past 6 months, we've been working a lot on performance of the F Sharp compiler and tools. And we have this project, it's called F Sharp Plus. It's this library that sort of like really tortures the compiler. Like it uses all of the features in F Sharp that make compilation slow, and it uses them a lot. And so it's a really good test bed for seeing if we've improved or if we've declined in some respect with with regards to building a project. And so it kind of varies from machine to machine and depending on the priority of the process that you're compiling on. But I've seen on my own machine anywhere from a 20% to a 35% improvement in compile times for that project with the latest F Sharp compiler. And so in fact, on my own machine, I think it was yesterday, if I use an older compiler from .NET Core 3.1, it would take about 1 minute and 30 seconds to build the project. And then if I use the .NET 5 compiler, it takes about 1 minute, which is a pretty big improvement. Now, subsequent runs, it kind of depends because it's not always a high priority process. And so sometimes it'll be like 20% faster, sometimes 25 or something like that. If I run it on my Mac, sometimes it's a little different too. But basically, no matter where I run it and how I run it, it's always faster, which is pretty great. And then the other big one that we're doing is we've been continually trying to improve F Sharp tooling in Visual Studio, and a big chunk of that is releasing with the Visual Studio 16.6 update that's going to be shipping with build. In particular, there's sort of this core routine of finding symbols that tooling does, and that powers things like find references and rename, where it basically says, oh, you have a symbol, I need to find everywhere where that symbol is being used in your code base. And so you can imagine if you have a very large code base, a whole bunch of code, there's a whole lot of symbols that it has to go through and check to see, oh, is this one of those, and so on. It's like an inherently expensive operation. However, that doesn't mean it can't be made as good as possible. And up until 16.6, it was arguably not done as good as it possibly could. Sort of the way that this feature would work in Visual Studio today is it would sort of say, okay, I'm going to scan your entire code base, and I'm going to build up this big old list of symbols. And then once I have the entire thing, I'm going to start processing it all. But the problem with that is, first of all, if you're doing find refs and you're using, say, the F# compiler code base, which has 300,000 lines of F#, which is on the order of at least 1 million C# lines of code, like that's kind of the scale that we're talking about here. Churning through that much stuff before showing anything to the user is not a very good experience. And then second of all, that actually, if you have to collect the entire set first, you're storing that all in memory. And that's a really big, basically a giant array that you have in memory, which can allocate on a large object heap. And if you allocate on a large object heap in Visual Studio tooling, that's like skull and crossbones territory. Like you don't want to do that. That'll just totally trash your performance. So we fundamentally changed this core routine that finds symbols to basically, depending on the thing that's calling it, sort of yield back a symbol whenever we found something. And then we've also changed the presentation layer for that in Visual Studio, because you'll notice if you do find references, it shows up in the find references window, and then it has colors, right? Like it'll colorize like the line of code that you see it being referenced in, and you'll be able to see like if it has the class color or the keyword color or something like that. The way that was getting colorized was also inefficient. And so you would kind of have this double whammy with find references, where it would be really inefficient to find all of the symbols, and that would also be really inefficient to display all of the symbols. Because when it would colorize things, it wouldn't do it in an optimized way. It would actually say, oh, this snippet lives in this document, so we need to classify this whole document and then give you all of the data that relates to just this little snippet. So to do that, we adjusted the F# parser to be able to parse tiny little snippets of code inside of a larger document and sort of understand the context from that document, and then sort of pass it into the smaller thing right here and only classify that little bit. So one of the big different, like it made a huge difference. So in the F# compiler code base, before, if I did something like find references on the bool type, which would give back like tens of thousands of results, it would ultimately cause Visual Studio to go out of memory, because there was just so many places that it was being used and so much stuff that was just happening that was frankly unnecessary. Today, not only does it not go but it rarely gets above 2 gigs when I do something that like wild from an operations standpoint, and I see results immediately. Basically, as the results sort of happen, they get yielded back. So if you're doing things like find refs and rename in a large F# code base, you should definitely notice an improvement all up in terms of performance, but then also specifically those features should work a lot faster and feel a lot more responsive. So that's sort of like the main stuff that's happening with the release that's going to be going out at Build with F#. So then I think the other thing that I wanted to mention was with .NET 5 Preview 3, we released the first preview of C# source generators, which was apparently quite a hit. We expected, some excitement from library authors, but I don't think we expected as much excitement as there actually was. There were like the blog post for that got an insane amount of comments from all kinds of people who were doing interesting stuff, like, not just NuGet package authors. And one of the, we've been able to collect a whole lot of feedback from that, which is really great. And so there's one of those updates is we're going to send out an update with Preview 4, which is going to be going out at Build, to have one of the things that people have asked for, which is being able to pass sort of a configuration into a source generator. So you can imagine, for example, say I'm writing a source generator that, I want to inspect user code, but like the user code, it might be there might be different like places that it's running, right? Like what if the user code is running on .NET Framework 4.5 and it's using .NET Framework stuff? I want to emit things that are going to be compatible with where those people are running that code. But there's sort of no way to do that today with source generators. You kind of got to guess, or like, maybe you could contrive a way for it to work, but it's really hard. But so really that's sort of a configuration setting that you can get passed in. You can basically say like, oh, well, this caller has this TFM. And so then you can say, okay, well, based off of this information, I'm going to possibly generate source code a little bit differently so that when it gets loaded into that context, they get the right generated source code. That's something that we got as direct feedback actually from somebody saying that they wanted to write a source generator that could generate code that could be used across different .NET Framework versions, because their SDK that they developed had to be available across all sorts of environments, even though they wanted those people to all upgrade, those people weren't necessarily able to upgrade at this point, but they still wanted to be able to use the SDK and use the generated source and that sort of stuff. So it's not just limited to TFMs. It actually uses the analyzer mechanism called analyzer config, which is just pairs. And so you can just have sort of any configuration of like this key and this value. You can pass that into a source generator. You can read that config, and you can just do stuff based off of the configuration that you're being passed. That's sort of one of the bigger updates going out for source generators, and like bug fixes and that sort of stuff. And I think we'll probably do like another call to action for next week for source generators, just sort of like reiterating, hey, everybody who's really excited, try out the new thing, tell us what you like, keep telling us your scenarios and things you'd like to do, because we want to collect as much info as we can and make sure that we're shipping the right thing this fall. So that's pretty much all I got to talk about for my side.
I already used it. Like, it's great. I can understand the excitement for source generators. I think it's probably the first time that we use the term generation that Kathleen approves of, because she always reminds us that code gen for most people is not the JIT. It's the it's the ability to emit source code at compile time, right? So Kathleen, what are your thoughts on source generation? You're muted right now. I can't hear you.
Oh, no, I'm not. Okay, sorry about that. No, I love it. I think source generators are great. I've got a usage I'll be doing or finding somebody to help me. I'm a little intimidated about getting into the Roslyn code base. I've been in there before, but it's been a little while. But there's some work on system command line that we're going to be able to use source generation to create a really cool startup experience. I can't wait to get that in place. So yeah. I think it's going to have some really interesting applications, but I'm super excited about what we're thinking about doing with it. Yeah, there's some other stuff coming in C# as well. And so next week, Mads Ferguson and Dustin Campbell are going to be doing a session at Build, and I highly recommend that you watch that, both because they're very entertaining and fun, and because their bits are extremely, extremely new. So it should be an interesting talk. But there's a couple of things coming to C# in addition. There's going to be a version of records. And if you want to catch up on any of this stuff, you can look at the LDM notes at github.com/.net/C# C#lang. And the language design notes are there. And so you can check out and see what's coming. We're looking at a not operator, which is going to be super nice, because if you've been writing a comparison to null, is better to do with is, just in case somebody ever redefines equals in a way that isn't copacetic with what you're doing, is will bypass that. So if you've been writing dot, open parens, something is null, close parens, then you'll be able to skip that and just say is not null. There's a couple of other operators in the match space, and an or may be coming in. So you see some of that, and top level statements, which we're experimenting with. I don't know if that's going to be talked about at Build, but we're definitely experimenting in that space. Phil talked about source generators. Another thing is we're looking at a new scope and a knit-only scope. And what this means is that you'll be able to do object initialization. So you say your class and then open curly, and then you do assignments. And that space will be in this new scope. So we have, the scopes that you know about. This new init-only scope will extend to those assignments. What that's going to let you do is use object initialization with fully immutable classes. So we're super excited about that. I think that's going to be really nice for folks. It ties into records. This work kind of ties together. So those are some of the things that's going to be coming along, and Mads and Dustin will cover that more next week. Phillip, did you have anything else? Did I remind you of anything else in C# that didn't make my list as I sat down and thought about this morning?
No, I mean, I think really I think Mads is going to be coming out with a post sometime next week that's going to really sort of be like the first introducing C#9. Check out all this awesome stuff, sort of thing that's going to go along with the post. I'm kind of just sort of waiting for that because I think he's got like the right like message about it. Like, I know about, there's like these positional patterns, there's like the not pattern, like that sort of stuff, and but he's got like it all in his head from like the correct frame standpoint.
Yeah, he's going to have some great samples both in the talk and then in the blog post. So I completely agree that to actually get deeper, I was just hinting which directions that things are headed. And, I'm hoping that we're going to finally get records right and get that out so people can do small immutable classes very easily and not have to go through some of the pain of today. So it's going to be a pretty exciting release.
So Kathleen, there was a question in chat, like where can they find this? I already opened the .NET C# Lang repo, but is there a particular document that we can point people to?
Yeah, so when you go to that repo, let's see, do I still have it open? Yeah, I do. So I'm going to the root so I can find it. Meetings, under meetings, you're going to see, and they'll reference back to proposals. You'll see a bunch of years starting in 2013. And if you open 2020, you get to see every time the C# LDM meets. And Anigaki does a fantastic job of taking notes on that meeting. And so you can... He does the magic shorthand he won't let anybody see, and then poof, he makes these great public notes so people can know what we're talking about. Any other questions in chat? Nobody was curious about what we were joking about on the V words?
I guess the question was, is there some write-up with like the overall features that you just described?
No, that's going to be Mads' post. That's Mads' blog post next week is going to be where you see that. There's no summary. This is just if you want to keep up on an ongoing basis and perhaps even comment on what's going on in the LDM. And this is where there's the painstaking work, because commas matter in C#, and when we design a syntax, it's incredibly detailed and tedious process to get it right, just like it is on the BCL. And when we go through that process, the language design takes an approach of being a closed meeting with public notes afterwards. And that makes it a little bit easier for us to get a little passionate sometimes. I'm sure that might have happened in LDM once or twice. So yeah.
Never.
Never. Yeah. So, so the V words we were joking about were the V word that Immo hassles me about is versioning. I don't think I need to talk about versions today, unless we get too deep into a couple things that I can talk about if people are interested. And then Visual Basic, and it's going to be there. It's coming to .NET Core, and we're doing work on it, and finishing some stuff up on that, and it's on my backlog to get a blog post put together. We're not quite ready for that, but getting really close. So, any other questions on? Are we saying anything come in on the chat? I don't have the chat up, so I'm having to get that from you guys.
Somebody says the title says community stand-up, but it seems to be my favorite stand-up.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, but we would like some questions. I was thinking about talking about like the relationship between MSBuild and Visual Studio, and that might sound like less exciting than something else you might ask about. But I have been into it lately and realizing that most people don't understand that relationship very well. So I can certainly talk about that. But what do you have, Immo?
Yeah, my world, there's not much new. Like most of the time, most of my time is being spent right now on all the TFM work still, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in that space, but none of this is particularly interesting in the sense that it's all just mechanics at this point, right? We're talking about what needs to happen in order to plug things through. But I'm really excited about it because the outcome, I think, will be much easier to understand once we have it in place.
Yeah, but isn't it incredible how hard it is to do TFMs? I mean, it's like, I think it'd be really difficult for people to imagine how many hours have gone into these like 6 strings, or I don't know how many strings it's going to come out to be in this version, but It's a very small number of strings. And it's just like, Oh my gosh, the amount of thought that goes into that, and it's changed once or twice. So what's it going out as? What are we going to build with? What is the .NET 5 TFM?
So for .NET 5, what we have is we've basically simplified our TFMs into something that kind of mirrors more closely the layer diagrams that we show people, right? We always have the same layer diagram in different colors, but pretty much we have this thing at the bottom, which is the shared layer that everybody has, which in the past we called .NET Standard, and now we will just call that effectively .NET 5, .NET 6, .NET 7, which is, the foundation of the platform, right? And then we have what we effectively call the platform-specific TFMs on top, right? We will have something like, iOS or Android on top of it, and they effectively have all the APIs that the bottom layer has, plus all the APIs that make sense for that particular environment, right? And then effectively what people can do now is they can look at the layer diagram and they can understand, okay, I need to write code that has to run in all the places so that I target the foundation. Or they can say, oh, I want to call it an iOS specific API. Well, then you have to target this other thing, right? And so the syntax of the TFMs will be very simple. We will have, we will continue the .NET Framework TFM, which was net version number, right? So, net for 5, net for 7, and now it will be net 5, which is basically the unified .NET platform that is core based moving forward. And then the only thing we're adding is the OS specific views on top of it, which would be net 5 dash whatever the OS is, right? Or net 6 dash whatever the OS is, right? And so then it should be relatively easy to look at a NuGet package, for example, and you can look at those strings in those folders, and you should be able to have a relationship in your head that says, well, if I'm on this platform, what binaries would NuGet select for me? Which right now is very complicated because you have all these different TFMs that are unrelated in version space, and and basically have all the other things on top, and then you have to reason about who is getting which version effectively, right? All right, I'm targeting .NET Framework 4.7. Which .NET Standard version do I get? Or I'm on 0 and 12. Which .NET Standard version will I get, right? And in the new world, it's all simpler because we just have the version number effectively for the .NET platform, and then the OS-specific version on the other side. But given that they're all strung together in one sentence, it should be easy for you to see prefix-wise effectively who is compatible with whom. That's the general idea.
Yeah. So a lot of thought went into getting us there. I just thought about something on Build. Next on the 19th, we're all going to be together again for Ask the Experts. You're joining us too, aren't you, Phillip? For the Ask the Experts at Build. Are you coming?
I think so. I know that let me check my calendar really quickly.
Make sure to check the night because it's very late.
It's the 19th. It's the 19th, and it's either 8 o'clock. It's either 8 to 9 or 9 to 10. I can't remember which. Pacific. That's a Pacific. That's Pacific time.
No, it's not. It's actually not on my calendar, but I remember saying yes.
No, let me actually check something because I had this issue as well. Like
we'll get you on there.
I think Jeremy pinged me.
And
I may have messed up along the way. So I thought I put you on there, and I know Immo's on there because he's going to help me out with some of the tech stuff that.
How about?
Especially audio, I'm very good at.
Myself available. I'll make sure that I'm available during that time, regardless of if I have an item on my calendar, and you can just add me to whatever.
Yeah. So anyway, Ask the Experts is going to be like this, only more so. Like we'll probably have some questions made up, but we're going to be answering questions, and so we really would like it if folks came with questions. We're going to have Rainer from MSBuild, so we're going to have an MSBuild expert. I don't have the list in front of me of who's coming, but we're going to have Jared, I believe, is coming from the compiler team, so we'll have that side of C#. I think Fred's coming, so we're going to have another engineer on C#. We've got Jeremy's coming for Indie Framework. Jeremy Likeness is coming for that, and so we've got folks from all over. I think Olia Gavrish is coming for WinForm's side of the house. So we're going to have all sorts of people there and talk about .NET from many different directions. So definitely come, definitely bring questions. It'll be a broader and even more expert than us. So it'll be a very good time, and hopefully we'll have a bunch of people there. We can handle. There's like no way we're going to max that room. So feel free to drop by and check it out.
Yeah, so it's from 9 to 10.
Thank you. 9 to 10 Pacific on the 19th, correct?
Yes, it's a Tuesday, right?
Yes.
And
Okay.
I'll make sure to put a block on my calendar for that.
And I'll try to find out what's going on with the calendar invites.
yeah, I'll just forward it to you. I don't know what happened, but like some people pinged me that didn't have the meeting because I canceled the one that I set up because I said there's another official one out, and then people pinged me and said I'm not on the official one, and then I looked at it. No, they were on the official one, but I still didn't get it.
All right, we'll figure it out. We'll be there. A bunch of great people are there. Do you have a list? Is there anybody that's on that list that, or do you not have one there?
Everybody you just mentioned except Phillip should be on it. So let me actually check again. So who's on it? It's Kathleen, Reiner, Mark, Olia, Michaela, Dan Roth, Jeremy Lickness, Jared Parsons, Fred Silverberg, myself. And I just forwarded it to Phillip.
All right. So we have the languages represented. We've got the SDK represented. We got MSBuild experts to answer your serious MSBuild questions. I'm on one of my goals that I'm setting myself for the next 6 months is that we will get a better story out about MSBuild so people better understand what happens when you hit build, because all that magic. There's a great line in one of J.K. Rowling's books where the Weasley father says, "Never trust magic you can't see." And MSBuild has gotten a bit to people just kind of close their eyes and push the button. And it's actually very understandable. It's complicated, but it is understandable. So Rainer will be there. He's my go-to person every time MSBuild gets too complicated for me, which happens pretty often. So yeah.
I think the part of the problem with MSBuild is that we haven't really treated it as a source code language, right? We have always treated it as you do some clicks in Visual Studio and then some XML magic is happening, right? And I think that's not the right way of doing it. But I think now, actually, I use it quite a lot, and I feel much more comfortable about modifying XML directly and getting the outputs that I want. But there certainly is a lot of stuff happening people are not aware of.
Well, it's an orchestrator running tasks and targets that have been being developed for 20 years. So it's, there's been a lot of kind of bolting things on. And unfortunately, that's likely to stay that way. But there's things that I think people aren't always clear about, like why is it that MSBuild sometimes has changes that are, difficult for people. And that can be as simple as adding a property and somebody's using that property because there's only a single namespace inside MSBuild. Right. And so some of this kind of stuff, it's very, very hard for us to change MSBuild. The world depends on MSBuild. Our world.net depends on MSBuild. And people have done things. So we do change it to make it better and faster. But we try really hard not to have breaks we don't need. But sometimes that happens. MSBuild is just it's a bit fragile in that sense because ultimately it's just an orchestrator. It will run what you want it to run, but it does that in a context that's shared with all the other things that are running. And so, if somebody changes a value, then that can have very negative impacts on other part of the MSBuild pipelines. So yeah. But
number one thing that is bitten me with MSBuild is that every property is effectively a global environment variable, right? Because if you have a global environment variable, it will pick it up. And we had plenty of cases where you build on some machine that happens to have some global variable defined. And in MSBuild, you have logic like if this thing is not set, do something. And it was already set, but it was set to something that did make sense, right? And then it would stop building, right? So it's certainly the downside of stringly typed, right?
Yeah, so MSBuild is definitely, and it's such an open tool that it can do just about anything, which means it can get you into trouble. So if you're doing stuff like, one of the things I want to work on, and Rainer and I have been talking about, is getting the documentation updated with like the top 3 or 4 things that people might do that is likely to get you into trouble. So we're working with the docs folks to set up a plan to get that better laid out, so it's easier for you to stay out of trouble there. Yeah,
somebody says, stupid question, but what is a TFM? So,
what a great question! It's brilliant. We are so we get so caught up in what we spend so many hundreds of hours on that one that we just like TFM. But you're right. Why don't you explain what that actually does for people?
Yeah, I think I need a button here, like for my GIFs, like "Oh my sweet summer child" would be an appropriate GIF to play right now. Yeah, TFMs stands for Target Framework Moniker, and as Phillip is eager to point out, moniker is just a fancy way to say name. It's effectively the string you see in your project files when you decide what version of .NET you are targeting, right? It's like .NET Core App, 3.1 for example, or .NET 4.7.2, or whatever other strings there are, right? And so it's effectively a representation of what .NET are you targeting in what version. And so as we're trying to simplify .NET, there's a lot of cleanup that we want to do where we make the names more sensible and have fewer names and fewer variants of names, which is hard in .NET because there's 20 years of history now where things went different ways, right? And we try to reconcile all of that as part of .NET 5, or at least a good chunk of it. If I understand correctly, in .NET Core, .NET 5 web frameworks that use Razor syntax, and we use Blazor pages are C# only. Is it possible we can evangelize WebDev in F# or VB, because sometimes the world thinks Microsoft has just abandoned the other languages? I know there are great F# options, for example.
So years ago, when the Razor language, the Razor was put together, the Razor engine was put together. It was put together as a single language thing, and it's big and it's expensive, and it's highly unlikely we're going to get it rewritten for Visual Basic. It would basically involve either duplicating everything in the C# version, which would be extremely expensive to do that, and then make the changes that would be needed, particularly because VB would need special work around XML literals and things like that, because why would you do Razor if you couldn't do these really cool things that VB can do? Or to spend just as much time and create one that is language agnostic. And so those are things that aren't likely to happen. There's some things that we may be able to do in terms of better interop between C# and Visual Basic to make it easier to have your views in a C# project and be able to have Visual Basic for your web API, for your entry point. So it can be MVC as long as you get out for your views, or web API, and then also your backend, the data in the places where VB really shines. So unfortunately, the VB-only solution in on ASP.NET is not too likely to happen, unfortunately. So sadness on that. So more questions? I did have something else to say on TFMs if we don't have more questions on
that.
Question.
How does a star core 2 application need to first be, okay, so I think I did this the wrong way. Okay, does a .NET Core 2 application need to first be upgraded to .NET Core 3, then to Core 5, or is there a direct path to .NET 5? Is the upgrade automatic, or does it require code rewrites? So in general, .NET Core 5, .NET 5 is effectively just .NET Core 5, right? So it's just a rebranded version of the .NET Core platform where we just skip the version number 4, right? So there's a very straightforward path from .NET Core 3.1 to .NET 5. And the path is effectively, you go to your project file, you change the string from .NET Core 3.1 to .NET 5, right? That's basically what you have to do. There's no rewrites required. I mean, there's always, of course, because when we go across major version boundaries on .NET Core, we're a bit more liberal with taking and breaking changes, but we do tend to make a good job documenting those and giving you, information about what you have to do to your app to make them work. By and large, there's not like source rewrites necessary, so it's not like we, change the world or something and then you have to do some crazy gymnastics to get there. But so in general, you should just change the project file, F5 your app, and then see what ends up happening. If you're coming from .NET Framework, that's a different story, but that's basically where tools like try-convert come in that would take your app and rewrite it. Or if you come from Xamarin, there might be other things you have to do. But from .NET Core to .NET Core is a very straightforward upgrade.
Right. Was that .NET Core to the number, or .NET Core space TO the word?
It was spelled, does a ** Core 2 application need to be upgraded to Core 3, then Core 5? Okay,
yeah. So I just wanted to point out to folks that that may have missed it, because we haven't talked about it on stage. It's clearly in the documentation. support, as is .NET Core 3.0. So .NET Core 2.1 and .NET Core 3.1 are in support, long-term support. They'll be there for a couple of years. But 2.0, 2.2, and 3.0 are all out of support and not being serviced. So I'd really encourage you to try to get onto one of those two versions so that you're able to service your runtimes in production and also keep your .NET Core SDK up to date.
Yep. And I think just sort of to echo some of what Immo was saying, as one of the authors of the Try Convert tool, there's conversion is just tricky business in general. You don't have to like follow this linear path. Like you can just go from .NET Core 2 to .NET 5 if you like. And like, you know, the act of like getting the project file into the correct shape, it would be fairly straightforward. But you would probably face a lot of problems after that because the API incompatibilities, especially with ASP.NET Core, are going to be present. And so that's sort of where the bulk of the time is going to be spent in terms of moving from one .NET Core to the next .NET Core. And that's something that I think you know has stabilized a bit more, but you know there may be some additional API breaking changes depending on what you're doing and where you're converting to and where you're converting from. So that's just sort of like an FYI that like there's in terms of like just updating the TFM. If you have like say package dependencies that all target on a standard, it should be fine. But like if you change your app type, like if you change to ASP.NET Core and it's like the very latest, you may get some breaking changes. There may be some third-party packages that do this similar sort of thing because you know maybe there's some you know some specific stuff available on .NET 5 or .NET Core 3 that wasn't available where they were in the past. So that's just kind of something to be aware of.
Right.
So circling back around to the TFM question for a second, one of the things you didn't talk about, Immo, was how TFMs are used. So we talked about MSBuild. So to start with, TFM is target framework, as target framework, is a property in MSBuild. So any target can use that. So it's available throughout in this global namespace of properties that MSBuild has. One of those is the TFM you're using. And one of the places that's used is when you're doing a NuGet restore. And so that allows you to get TFM-specific versions of NuGet packages. So it gets used in quite a few places, as well as picking up the right runtime for you. So that's why that's such an important indicator, as well as the runtime. It does other things as well to keep everything lined up. That's the key that everything depends on, so that you get a coherent group of assets when you're doing your build into a .NET application.
Yeah, and I mean, the general gist of TFMs, how you use them is you just have them effectively in your project file, right? I mean, everybody uses them, you may not be aware of it, but that's usually also not that important. Like for the most part, I think people are successful building applications without even being aware that there's such a thing as a TFM, right? And I think the party that has probably to think about this the most is basically library authors, right? People that have to build things that run in multiple places, right? And that's fundamentally, unfortunately, harder than building an application. So there's only so much we can abstract away, right? There's some things that are just inherently there that you have to be aware of. So for example, you run a library that runs on Windows and Linux. Well, then there are differences in behavior that you as a library author have to be aware of, right? If you, for example, interact with path APIs, well, path APIs behave differently between Windows and Linux, right? And so you have to write your code in such a way that it works in both places. And unfortunately, those differences are not just OS-specific differences, they're also runtime-specific differences, right? Because different execution environments have different policies. For example, if you run on iOS, there is no JIT, right? Because iOS does not allow JITted applications. So there's a code-gen story for iOS coming, or I think it's already there, that is based on interpretation. And that allows you to emit IL and actually execute it, but it won't be very fast because it's interpreted, right? And so there's APIs we expose where you can, for example, ask whether you get fast IL or not. But again, if you do optimization in your library, you want to make things faster by generating code at runtime rather than, for example, let's say you build a regex, maybe you want to emit code at runtime rather than, interpreting the regex. Well, that only makes sense if the runtime you're running on is actually executing that IL, right? If it's just interpreting that IL, probably interpreting the regex would be faster than going via IL, right? And so those are some examples where it's just, we can't quite abstract these things away from you. We can try to make things simpler, but at the end of the day, if you want to write code that runs in multiple places and you want to provide high fidelity, there are things you have to just think about. And TFMs is just one of the many tools we have that allow you to reason about the differences and the commonalities. That's really the way I think about it.
Yeah. So do we have any more questions coming in?
So there's a very lengthy one. Let me read this. Devs coming from .NET Framework 4+ are used to having forward compat and not even recompiling or even caring about security updates because of Windows Update. What should .NET Core devs be thinking about in terms of servicing, paying attention to security patches, rebuilding, redeploying, containers, etc.? I feel like devs are unprepared for this new world.
I think that it's a change that we've made some efforts to guide people through, but I think we can do better for sure. So there's different ways you can build your application. So if you build a framework-dependent application, we're starting to call that runtime-dependent applications. What that means is that you put on the machine your application, and it reaches out and grabs the runtime from the machine. Then if that machine has a runtime patch, you're going to run on that patch. However, if you do a self-contained application, and the self-contained application is containing the entire .NET in it, that's what self-contained apps are. They take the version that you're publishing with, and it actually deploys it onto the machine. The good side of that is that then you don't have to worry about a separate path to get the runtime onto the user's machine. The bad side of that is now you're responsible for servicing, so you'll have to republish when there is a runtime change. So one of the big differences is for really good reasons, I think, we are not in Windows and not in Windows Update. So getting the updated runtime on the machine, either via a separate process that's done once per machine or via republishing your application, is what we need to do because we're not in Windows and we're not using Windows Update to get those runtimes out to people. So that is a really big change, and I agree that folks are not always ready for that difference. Do they have any follow-up on that?
Me or in general?
No, either you or the person who asked.
Yeah, so some people are saying they asked questions on Twitch where we only look at YouTube. We're looking at all of them, but it's possible that we missed questions. So basically we have a unified chat view where we can see YouTube, Twitch, and Mixer. So we see all of them.
At least we're supposed to see all of them. If we're missing some, sorry about that.
Well, definitely see comments on all platforms, but it doesn't mean that there is not some missing.
Missing, yeah.
But how do I go from Java 8 to .NET 5? That's harder. But you can start by uninstalling the Ask toolbar.
That's a good idea, right? Start by uninstalling Java, is that what you said?
Yeah, Java 8 to .NET 5. I mean, what's interesting with Java is that people are, I don't know, like people always diss Java, but Java and .NET are very similar in spirit, right? There's some design philosophy differences that we have, and there was a talk recently from somebody on the .NET team who actually came from Sun/Oracle about what these differences are. But if I were to summarize them, it basically boils down to that Microsoft has been more eager to innovate in the languages versus Sun/Oracle were more eager to innovate in the runtime. And as a result, there's some differences, but basically the exact same Java code you wrote 15 years ago might now be optimized differently because the runtime has a lot more abilities to, for example, devirtualize and inline methods versus on the .NET world, we basically said, well, we want predictable performance. And the way you get this is by letting the developer express their intent, right? Versus the Java model is the developer just writes the code they want and then the runtime takes care of that. And so that results in different experiences, right? Where sometimes the Java one is better because it means you just get perf optimizations for free. Sometimes the .NET model is better because if you change code around, you know at compile time what behavior you're getting rather than, oh no, the runtime is no longer able to optimize it, so your performance tanks by 4x, right? And so there are those differences, and then there's just, differences in terms of, philosophy, I guess, where, we have a certain favor for, like a certain, I guess, taste for language design, and Java has a different one. But by and large, they are very, very similar. Same with APIs, right? I mean, there's always these jokes about, I think there's this website, is this a fake name, or is this an actual API name in the Java Spring setup? And they present you with 4 API names, and they all look like Markov chain generated API names, but apparently 3 of them are real and 1 of them is fake. But I mean, we can all point fingers at each other all day long, right? Like, no platform is perfect.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm gonna have to hop off here because I have another meeting at 11.
Yeah, it seems like we're now mostly getting comments rather than questions.
Yeah.
Right.
I'll let you all take the rest of the comments, and I'll try to hop off as graciously as I can. So,
well, Phillip, have a great day.
Yeah, and hopefully, yeah. All right, you too. Take care.
Bye-bye. Oh my god, I can't believe this worked. I just removed Phillip from the view.
All right, and we didn't hang it up. People can still hear us, I guess. Excellent.
Hopefully, yes.
Hopefully.
No, it should all be fine. Yeah, let me just quickly see whether there's more questions. I don't think there's any more questions. It's more like a discussion going on there. So unless you have anything more, I would say I'm happy to end this call early, because normally we run over.
Well, yeah, yeah, we've been known to go over pretty badly. But I think today the big news is that next week is a big build event, and you're going to get a lot of information there. We're super excited about the format of the virtual build and setting up these spaces for people to interact. That's the big thing that we want to try to do at least as well as at a conference. So one of those is our Ask the Experts, but if you look at the schedule, there is a ton of different ways for you to get one-on-one with a team or with a particular person or whatever. So check the schedule out for that and look at opportunities to come and ask questions and hear what kind of questions other people have. So we're super excited about that. And this week's a little bit, I think it's easy to end early because we are just all, waiting for the big announcements next week, the blog posts that'll clarify things that, we didn't have samples ready because they're going to be there in the blog posts and the talks next week.
Sounds great. Yeah, if you haven't checked out Build, you should check out Build. I'm not sure you can still sign up for it, but given that it's virtual, maybe you can. And I think also it's mostly broadcast. So I think you can just literally open the browser and watch what's going on. So make sure to check out the blog because you will probably blog a lot in next week. Major announcements are coming. Then I guess see you in 4 weeks, I guess?
Yeah, so see everybody in 4 weeks.
Sounds great.
All right.
Let's say bye-bye.
Bye-bye.